Welcome to Beans and Breakdowns, a podcast dedicated to bridging the gap between specialty coffee and the heavy music community. On this episode, I'm joined by Dan Thomson of the band Lowheaven. So grab a fresh cup of coffee and wake the fuck up! What's going on, Caffeinated crew? Today, I'm joined by Dan from Lowheaven. Dan, how are you? You just took a sip of coffee right when I asked you that question.
A little intro was a little shorter than I expected it to be. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm drinking something that's very exciting to me, only because of the sentiment. Not just because of this, but it has sentiment attached. But happy to be talking with you. I know we talked about it a little bit before, but we kind of have this weird detached past that feels like a lifetime ago because we played one show together in past bands, but it's cool to be catching up, being current. So let me know what you're drinking right now.
It's funny because I'm actually drinking something a little bit out of the ordinary. I actually brought the bag too, so if you want to check that out. So it's a brand called Quietly, the Ali and Lenny brew. It's a Brazilian coffee, and I'm a little fond of Brazilian. I am also really into Kenyan coffee, but that's a different thing. But the nice thing about this is this place is about 15 minutes outside of where I grew up as a kid. And it's become kind of a favorite because it's, it's got that little local sentiment. And also my brother-in-law is a massive fan of it. Mm-hmm. So him and I have kind of shared that joy between it. It's a really nice, really kind of smooth drinking one, and it's got a little bit of a kick at the end, which I kind of like. But big fan of Quietly, big fan of the brand. They've got a few different ones, but this one is just fantastic. Like it's really hard to argue with, and it pairs really well with a lot of different stuff. So kind of an idiot-proof coffee in my opinion.
Quietly's out of Northern Ontario, if I'm not mistaken.
Sterling actually. Okay. So I grew up in Belleville, which is about just this side of Toronto, but kind of in the middle between the two of us. Sterling is slightly northwest of Belleville by about 15 or 20 minutes.
Oh, okay. That's why I got it confused, because I remember looking it up. I was in Toronto not too long ago, like close to Whitby, and was looking for some coffee. And I was like, is Quietly anywhere around here? And it was kind of, but not. It was too out of the way. So yeah. But I'm a big Quietly fan as well. They have a few places here that carry it.
It's I hate to say it this way, but it's quietly become quite popular. And I know the guy that runs it used to work somewhere else. I don't want to guess at what the brand was. But I remember we just stumbled across it because the coffee shop down the street from me had it. And I think I've tried all the blends that they've had at this point. Even their espresso running as like a drip coffee or running as a pour over coffee is good, which sometimes espressos aren't like that. Yeah. But yeah, it's really, to me, it's like, I like to try a bunch of different things. I'll always kind of buy some new coffees. There's a couple of spots that we buy from pretty regularly, but like if we're traveling, I'll always grab beans from different places. And but this one is kind of an easy grab. Like, you're just going to get what you're looking for out of it. And that's awesome.
Yeah, it's great to have that that like staple that you're able to know, like consistency. Anything you try is going to be good. I have one here that is my favorite, but also because it's my friend's roaster. But that's neither here nor there. He just roasts really good coffee. I'm drinking something that you may appreciate it too. It's the Big Riffer. It's from Botfly and Have Fun Coffee. Have Fun out of, I believe, Dartmouth. Yep.
I love me the Botfly crew.
The Bots boys are the boys. Yes. Yeah. So they bestowed upon me a bag when they came through recently on their tour. So big shout out to Botfly. And this is it's a Peruvian coffee. Oh, nice. It is washed. And it's got some plummy notes, chocolate, almond. It's that kind of classic, like Peruvian coffee. So not too kind of dark and bitter, but
Hmm.
also not like over funky at all. So really, really good. Kind of like a diner coffee, but elevated.
I love that. I mean, any kind of diner coffee I'm kind of into in a roundabout way. But I also like that there's a sneaky little cave-in reference in there, which is just me being a big nerd because that's my favorite
Mm-hmm.
band. But yeah, actually, I've seen that pop up a few times lately, and I'm not sure why I haven't ordered some yet. I should probably get on that.
You should. It also comes in this nice bag, like it's yellow, and actually they have different color bags, but it's got this funny like little graphic on it too.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's
So
cool.
plus it's nice to support people doing funky, cool coffee things.
100%. I'm
Um,
glad neither one of us were like, well, I'm having a Starbucks.
you'd be surprised.
Oh, never
Not
mind.
me. Not on my. No, not on my side. No, no.
Okay.
Well, actually, I won't. I won't. I won't confess anything right now.
Yeah, no,
Just
don't
let's
drop any
just say
secrets.
when you're on the 401 and you're on a long stretch, there's a lot of places where you can't get coffee. I'll just leave it there. Okay.
You know what? Honestly, somebody should do, and if somebody does this, I want 20% of the profits, but they should develop a widget for Google Maps to show you where all the like indie coffee shops are.
Like specialty coffee places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because unless you know
That,
what you're looking for, it's not going to pop up, right? So,
I mean, I'll tell you, staying in Whitby or Oshawa, that was a deep dive that took me about an hour to find something within driving distance.
yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, even when I go home to Belleville to visit my niece or whatever, there's really only one place that will go to coffee, and they're for what Belleville is, they're really doing a good job. But it's also like it's Pilot Coffee, which is in
Mhm.
essence become like Starbucks 2.0. So I get it, I get what you mean, but yeah.
I'm a Pilot fan though. I like
Oh
it.
yeah, okay.
They
I
have some stuff that they do seasonally that's very
mhm.
very good.
I think for me, it's just exposure. Like it's
Mhm.
so everywhere. It's kind of like Dark Horse around here. The
Mhm.
coffee, like in the grand scheme of things, the coffee's not bad, especially in comparison to a lot of the bigger chain ones. I think I can't, I want something unusual.
Right.
I'd rather go to, the smaller like area coffee place than go to the big Pilot thing. But I'll take Pilot any day of the week over Second Cup or like any of those places. So
Second cup smoothie shop with coffee. I won't trash too much, but I've never had a good cup of coffee from there. So
I actually worked at one very briefly for about 3, maybe 4 months, and it was inside a hospital.
mm,
And it was a good job in the sense that because it was inside the hospital, it paid really well. But even just smelling the brew of the coffee of that, what is it, Caramelletto or something, or whatever that brand, like their mainstay coffee is, just made your stomach upset. And it was just
mhm.
all day of like, oh, like you just can't handle it. So
No,
whenever I
but
see a cup, it's like I get flashbacks immediately.
give me how do you brew?
So it really depends. I actually work at a restaurant a couple days a week as a barista as well. So if I'm there,
Oh,
obviously I'm doing, generally speaking, a long shot of espresso in the morning,
okay.
depending on how I'm feeling. At home, I actually have either a nice little pour over set if I'm doing, 1 or 2 cups. Actually, one of my coworkers gave me a really nice kettle because he had moved on to a different setup, and that's surprisingly made a big difference to me. I thought the kettle that I had was actually pretty nice, but this one is astronomically better. I also hilariously have this cheap, like $45, um, like basket drip coffee
Like a
thing.
Mr. Coffee kind of deal.
Kind of, yeah, and it surprisingly is brews pretty good coffee. And it's awful looking. It's all plastic and just terrible. But sometimes when I know I'm going to have more than a cup or two, like it's kind of easier doing it that way, and
Yeah.
it surprisingly tastes good. And then we have an really old Bodum, but that doesn't really get used that often. It's kind of hit and miss. Or like if we
Mhm.
know a coffee that we've got tastes better by doing it as the Bodum, we'll do that. But for the most part, it's kind of the first two options, whether it's a nice pour over or using the hilariously awkward coffee machine.
Do you do like a French press like a V60 pour over or
Yeah, I believe that's what it is if I'm remembering correctly.
Like the
It's
Hario?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's I picked it up. When we were in the studio recording the new Low Heaven stuff. Brett that we recorded with had a really nice setup, and I had been using a like kind of, I don't want to say like smaller setup, but it was just like a kind of a small little sat over basket with a little in essence like a pull tab, so you could let the water sit for a minute as you started to pull it in, then pull the pull
Yeah.
tab out, and it would start to drain. And while I was at the studio, he was like really showing me how his worked. And I was immediately like, oh, I've got to buy this because it's astronomically different, but it's also like just easier to use. It was less cleanup. It was less,
Hmm.
like you pull the little filter out of at the end, rinse it off with a little bit of water, and it's good to go.
Yep.
But if you wanted to, you could do like half cups, and you could do all of these different measurements, and it would show you exactly where the beans should go based on what you're using. So that was a big major investment, and like, I'm never going back in that sense.
Yeah. What's bad is I've gotten so far in. So I use the V60 as well.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I do like what's the kettle that I have is like a temperature hold, like it's made for specifically doing pour overs, like the spout and everything.
This is the long
Um,
kind of like snaky spout on it.
yeah, it's the fellow EKG is what
Oh,
it's
okay.
called.
Yeah.
And then like the scale and everything, the grinder, it's so annoying. But and then it's taking time like, oh, like, do I need to grind more coarse? Do I need to grind more fine? How do I get it dialed in? So yeah, this is all terrible rabbit hole things that coffee will lead you into. I don't know
It's
if
good
you've
though.
gotten if have you gotten to that point?
So my grinder is probably the only thing I'm lacking on. I got it a couple of years ago. It was like some kind of points thing, like credit card points or whatever.
Nice.
And the I again was like kind of investing in improving some of the stuff that I had. And it works really well because I'm not always doing pour overs. It's kind of like a
Mhm.
wider range one. It could be a little bit better for finding that sweet spot for like like the right pour over with the right weight, but I'm okay with it for where it sits right now. It's just one of those things where it's like, you have a list of things of like, I want to upgrade this, I want to upgrade that. So
Right.
the grinder is the one thing where I'm like, I know I need to get there, but also like it's doing its job as good as it could at the moment. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, you can never go wrong with a good hand grinder because it's gonna, in the long run, be better than like trying to repair an electric one. It's terrible. Plus, my hand grinder, I get better consistency out of that than I do with my electric one. So
I would believe that. I would
yeah.
believe that.
So
And plus, like, you get that forearm workout going to
exactly. You get to further like have your ritual in the morning, your tactile, wake up kind of thing. It's nice.
Yeah.
I used to do it at work every morning.
Oh yeah.
And annoy the shit out of everybody because you could hear it all over the office. It's like, like, are you making coffee?
No, I'm just trying to make sure you guys are awake.
Just grinding spices.
I like a lot of coriander in my coffee.
Yeah. Let me get some cardamom. Give me your introduction into heavy music. I know that Low Heaven is, I think, much more on the heavy side than what Sparrows was. Sparrows was a lot more that post rock kind of oriented sound. Low Heaven's going more in like a screamo post. I don't want to say post screamo because that's just try hard, but in the sense of combining some more like atmospheric things with a very screamo sound. So I guess give me what your introduction, what your background is into leading up to what Low Heaven is doing.
So I actually started like my family is relatively musical. My dad is a drummer. And so my sister and I grew up with a lot of music around, and it wasn't just like, oh, my dad's really into Led Zeppelin or something like that. Like it's really all over the place. And even my mom is a big music consumer. So we grew up hearing all kinds of different stuff. Genesis was a big one in our household, which is, people think about that as like the, but if you get into their catalog, it's like really proggy and really good. But as I grew up, and kind of followed in, like I said, my dad was a drummer. My grandfather was like a savant. He could pretty much play anything. And so the interest in knowing and figuring out how to play something had been there for a really long time. But it wasn't until I kind of hit high school and kind of started hearing what was going on around there, kind of in that, like, Blink-182 and Green Day and that sort of shit was
Right.
kind of popping off. And so that was kind of the dive into, for lack of a better term, like guitar music. But it was very quickly after that that I started to go down rabbit holes pretty hard. I was not necessarily the most popular person in high school. And when you grow up in a smaller town, and you're not into Leonard Skinner and field parties, you have a lot of time on your hands. So I used to like explore the shit out of like mp3.com and like the beginning of MySpace and all of those things, just looking for anything. It became pretty easy. I mean, Spotify kind of does this now, but like you would go and you would find a band and then they would give you like 10 other bands that sounded like that.
Yep.
So I very quickly went from this like pop punk stuff to finding like Small Brown Bike, and then Planes Mistaken for Stars. And then when I hit Planes Mistaken for Stars, for some reason, it just sent me down a hole of like City of Caterpillar and kind of bands of that general area. And from there, it fell off into other stuff. And then as things blew up, I just started to get into this and get into that and get into whatever. Mm-hmm. And the secret to my enjoyment of something is if the guitars are loud and aggressive, I'll probably like it to an extent. But then it just became a big thing. And I became very obsessed with a bunch of different things. Once I got to the point of like wanting to be in a band and starting to take it seriously, like the first band I was really in that did some touring and whatnot, it was a bit more on the poppier side, but I want to say that was limited by my skill. Like being able to play guitar, I wasn't that great at it. I wasn't kind of able to do a lot of the ideas that I had in my head. And that took a few years to get me to a point where I could kind of nail what I was after. But yeah, I never really set out to be in like a metal band or a hardcore band or anything like that. It was always me trying to take what I was listening to and what I heard in my head and make a version of it public. And I mean, for all the years in Sparrows, like if you look at the catalog from the start of Sparrows until when we finished, there's an astronomical difference from that first EP to the end. And I think that's a good thing. I like when bands kind of evolve and do all of this kind of weird shit. I mean, like I mentioned before, I'm a massive Cave In fan, and they have the most dynamic discography you could think of. Like they've been 5 bands at some point. I mean, it's true. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Sparrows kind of like ran its course, and we did what we did, and we would do heavy shit and we would do spacey shit and we would do kind of in between, and we would kind of float all of these different things. And then COVID happened, and then everybody's lives fell apart, and everybody around me fell apart, and everything that was going on fell apart. And it was really like we started a new band, and we had this idea. And then as we started pumping things out, it was like, oh, we're writing the soundtrack to our nightmares. And I think it would be really hard to write anything other than something really heavy, given what was going on. Yeah. And like I will say, like, we never set out to write these big, massive, heavy songs. It was just like, let's find something in common ground. And then it was just like every single song was just like, okay, this is heavy. What's the next one? And I think that the fact that that was a natural reaction to what was going on is what makes this, I would say, even more genuine, because there was no attempt to be like, let's make this sound like fucking, I don't know, whoever's big and angry,
So I know that you guys are doing like, because on the lineup, it's really only like bass, guitar, keys, and then everybody kind of does vocals. But is there a drummer? Like what's...
Oh, yeah. So when we went into the studio, we didn't have a drummer. And Brett that we recorded with, he is a drummer. And originally we were like, oh, you could just play on this. But then once we sent him all the demos, he's like, oh, no, I got to find somebody that fits this better. So a gentleman by the name of Dante ended up playing all the drums on all the record or on all the recordings. He plays in a band called Family Dinner that are kind of popping off right now. Fantastic band, but very different from what we do. And what was nice about it is that he's a kid, like compared to the rest of us. Like he's probably like mid-20s ish. But we would come in and we could say to him, like, we want this to sound like your Neurosis part. And he'd be like, okay. And he would go in and he'd fucking crush it. And I will love him forever for that because he gets all the references. Yeah. But in essence, we kind of hit this point where it was like, we don't have somebody available to us. We obviously have a drummer now. And his name is Justin. He's fantastic as well. But getting the record done and ensuring our calendar and everything kept going, it was the easiest thing to do is to find this guy. And honestly, he's one of the best drummers I've ever seen play. Most of the time, we would listen to the demo in the studio. We'd kind of rework things a little bit. And then we'd be like, okay. And he would go in and he would play the song. And then Brett would be like, let's do this part different, this part different. And after 3 or 4 takes, it was done. Like it was insane. So, but yeah, the rest of it was just the 3 of us. Like, you know, there's not kind of any other auxiliary musicians or anything like that. You know, it's Mikey and I doing vocals and Alex and I doing guitars and Mikey playing bass. And, you know, the little bits of programming and keys and stuff that are in there are kind of spread out between everybody. But we really wanted to kind of keep it like in the crew because we had been working on these songs at the point. I think about 1.5 years by the time we started getting to the studio. So, but yeah, Dante's the king. He's awesome.
So you guys already had basically everything done before the singles and everything. It's not like you're writing and then you have like 2 singles and then you're releasing that, but it's your rollout's like set.
Oh yeah. Okay. We had the record was done with the exception of mastering by, I think, what year are we in? 2023.
Yes.
By the middle of 2021.
Oh, wow.
And we got it mastered at the beginning of 2022 because we had a lot of there was shopping going on and a lot of different things. And,
right.
You know, we had certain people kind of like helping us with certain aspects of stuff, but also we weren't in a rush for obvious reasons. That's something that Sparrows ran into a lot was that like we would get something done and we were like, we want to do it this way. You don't want to help us? Okay, fine, we'll do it. Whereas the other way with this, we've been purposely taking our time, making sure that it makes sense for this, you know, and luckily it's worked out really well. You know, a lot of what we've wanted to do has worked out the way that we wanted it to. And I do credit us in the sense of like being willing to wait it out, but also like there was a lot of stuff that we had to learn coming out of COVID about how the new world of touring and being a musician and all this stuff was going to work. And we kind of got to watch people their trial and error and kind of learn from that before we even did anything, which is a kind of a dark way of saying it, but it's true. It's that we kind of lucked out in that way, you know?
Mm-hmm. What's the biggest difference from being in a band touring like pre-pandemic to now? Like, what have you noticed in terms of shows? Show
attendance is way up. The Toronto show that we did here with Spotlights was absolutely rammed. Even the Montreal show, like I've played some good Montreal shows over the years, but it's always been kind of like an uphill battle in the sense that you'll get a lot of people out, but they won't necessarily be into what you're doing. And the Montreal show that we just did at Turbo House was bonkers. Like it was a very good crowd, very interactive, and like that wasn't happening in the same way pre-pandemic. And I mean, I would attribute this to any section. Like if we were talking about restaurants or we were talking about, you know, any number of other things, I think everybody came out of COVID being like, I miss being a person. And, you know, going to shows or going to book readings or any kind of arts related stuff. I think people are really diving into making an effort to be involved in that stuff. But I would say that's really what the biggest thing that I've noticed is that like the attendance is there and the people's willingness to interact and be involved is up. But the other side of it is that like everything else is tighter. like budgets for things are tighter, and
Yeah.
like the risk versus reward stuff is not quite as it used to be. But I mean, that's a given when you see how everything's gone. It's not that
Yeah.
surprising. It's just like, it's obvious, For me though, honestly, I can't even tell you, like, Sparrows toured a lot, like a lot. And there was a certain point where I feel like I hit this zone without realizing it, where I was like, I don't like this anymore. Because we would be out for weeks on end. We'd come home for a few weeks. We'd go back out for a few weeks. And like, I love traveling. And like I had mentioned before, I think we started recording, like I love to eat. I love going to restaurants and trying new things and doing all that stuff. But I was, in hindsight, getting really burnt out by playing the same venues with the same types of bands and the same sort of stuff. And now, like, we just did that drive home from Montreal that everybody knows is miserable. And the whole time I was like, this is fucking great. Like, we're out playing shows. It's fucking awesome. Like we had a show in Ottawa that we did that was like a very weird kind of mixed bill show at a venue that we wouldn't necessarily play at. And again, I used to get really bummed out to be like, none of the bands sound right. Like, why are we playing the show? And instead, like, we had the best time of like, oh, this is sick. Like, this band sounds like fucking Screeching Weasel. And then the next band sounds like the hardcore band. And then we played. And like that, it wasn't a bummer anymore. It was just awesome that we were able to do it. And like, I really, it's in my head now that like, I have to be like, you can't take this for granted. Like, you did for so long and it goes away. And now it's just like, be happy. Oh, we got a 12-hour drive. Sick. Like, don't be bummed about it anymore. But I mean, I think, that the break that I didn't ask for really brought back my love of what I'm doing and like how all of that works,
Right. Yeah. I definitely see, like, in a lot of bands and people from that world, like, even I'm in a band with younger people and then people that have toured for a long time and like lots of different bands. And even they're like, it sucked. Like, before the pandemic, like, you were tired. Everybody was tired. And so now, like, we drive to Hamilton to play one show and drive back the next day. And, the turnout's maybe not great, but it's like, at least we get to see our friends. You know what I mean? Like, at least we get to like hang out with people and we're playing music. But yeah, same kind of attitude, instead of being like bummed out where it's like, oh man, like the venue wasn't as packed as we wanted it to be. It's still like, at least we got to like get breakfast with all of our friends in the morning. Like, that's like the fun part. So
100%.
It's definitely, I do think all of us are kind of like, we can't let this like become a chore again. Like, it's just got to be, if you love it, you love it. Like,
this is kind of a weird thing to say, but it also seems like the caliber of music has gone up.
It's weird.
And it's very weird, but even bands that I knew that existed pre-COVID, whatever's come out after COVID is better. Yeah. It's like they've become, I mean, maybe everybody sat at home just fucking woodshedded the whole time, which is awesome. But it's like, even like sometimes you can play shows where you've got like a local on it, and the local is maybe just starting, or it's like a hobby band for them, and that's great. But there's like a ceiling to how good they're going to be. And the Montreal show that we played, I feel terrible because I can't remember the name of the band, but they were fantastic. Like, they were really good. And, again, burnt out Dan probably wouldn't have even watched them pre that, but they were very good. They were very friendly. And same sort of thing. Like, that just puts you in a good mood, when you play with somebody and you're like, you fucking killed it. Now I got to go out and kill it, it's such a wonderful thing. And it throws me back to like when I was a kid and was like, we would be the opening band for like somebody bigger. And I'd be like, they were so much better than us. How do we do that?
Right.
And that's really nice. Like, I, even just going to random shows in Toronto sometimes, like, I'm not the most connected into other bands that are going on in Ontario to an extent, because there's just so much to digest. So a lot of times it's like, somebody else in my band will suggest something like, oh, you should check this band out. And that's kind of how I fall into it. But we were at a show at the Bovine about a month and a half ago. And the couple of bands that we caught while we were there, I was just like, these guys are fucking ripping it. And that's a nice change. You know what I mean? Like, and I think everybody knows kind of what I'm getting at to an extent where it used to maybe not be like that. So,
yeah. Oh yeah. But it's the same in Montreal. Like our turnouts have been ridiculous. Like, I mean, not just across hardcore, but I think in most genres I've been to shows and it's like packed or almost packed. But yeah, the caliber is way higher. It's very interesting, like a dynamic, but I'm not mad at it.
There's no complaint to be had other than the fact that it's harder to walk from the merch table to the bathroom.
100%. Or it's either too packed or everybody, like you see like 8 of your friends on the way and you have to stop and have like a conversation with each person. And that sucks. You have to
we all just meet outside after? Like, come on.
There's a band playing. I can't hear you. No.
Yeah.
Well, what does Low Heaven coming up? I know y'all got the EP coming out. Y'all got some dates, but go ahead and give the plug.
So what I will say is that there may or may not be a massive tour announcement that comes out. The only reason I don't know if I can say something about it yet is they haven't told me when I'm allowed to say it. Okay. But in essence, we're going to be gone on a very big US tour. I mean, big for us, through almost all of October, which is great. We have a couple shows with Dreamwell coming up. If you haven't checked them out, they're fantastic.
Very good band.
Very good. I don't really know them personally, but the interactions I've seen online, they also seem very nice, which is always a big deal for me. But they have a new record coming out, and we're really excited to kind of support them for a couple of shows. We're doing Montreal and Toronto, I think. Mm-hmm. Turbo House again, actually.
In November, I think.
I think it's the 2nd and 3rd of November. I'm not sure. But I'm really excited about that. I get really excited about playing with bands that when I listen to it, I'm like, this is good. I want to hear more. And they're definitely one of those because I was not super familiar beforehand. My friend Matt plays in a band with one of the other people in Dreamwell. And Matt had given me a bit of a heads up to be like, you need to check this out, which is great. So that's exciting. And then I know we have shows in December, but that's not going to be announced for a little while. So it's a busy, like kind of last few months of the year. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I'm not exactly sure. I know we're taking a couple of months to like kind of regroup a little bit, but in essence, you know, like we found the right home with a lot of stuff and that's working out really well for us. And we're just really excited to like get out and play shows and see people and fucking eat some tacos, you know, like.
Go to the US for the good things, the food.
The first show on this October tour is in Austin. Oh, yeah. And Sparrows did South by Southwest a bunch of years ago, and I lived off of tacos from there. Like they used to have, there was a taco stands everywhere where you could get these like deep fried avocado tacos, and they were like 3 for $5. And I think that's all I ate for the 4 days that we were there. And granted, it's South by Southwest, so they're giving away free shit everywhere too. So like you just go by and grab like 19 bottles of water and like all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I haven't been back to Austin since I think 2015. So I'm like, I'm ready to go. Give me all the tacos.
You got to go get some brisket tacos.
Oh, I don't eat meat.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's fine.
No, the boys do though. So I'll make sure that they do.
Put them on. Yeah. Put them onto the brisket. That's something you can only get in Texas.
Alex, especially. I mean, all 3 of them are pretty adventurous eaters, but Alex is like a he should know better, but he eats anyway kind of thing. And that sounds like something that he would have like 15 of. So that'll be kind of funny.
There's a few, if you got some carnivores in your band, there's some places that I could put, if they don't already know, like Terry Black's barbecue is phenomenal. Franklin's is over there. Of course, that's like a staple.
Is Franklin's the one that has the slogan where it's like, our meat's so soft, you could eat it without teeth or something like that?
I think so.
I think that's the one it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's countless places. Y'all will not run out, but for you, the deep fried avocado tacos. Now I see why that's definitely a selling point.
Oh yeah. I mean, the only place that I've had, actually, well, 2 places, but the 2 places I've had better Mexican food. One was San Antonio, which makes sense because it's farther south than Austin.
That's Tex-Mex right there. That's really
100%. Good. But there's this place in Vegas that Piper from Roman Candle told me about.
Okay.
And it's called Tacotarian. And granted, it's a vegan taco joint, but holy fucking shit, it's so good. And like just mine. Like I was there 3 times in the 5 days I was in Vegas. Like it just like jammed in my face. And I will dream about that place until we get to go back.
So yeah, people sleep on Vegas. It's not all just, shitty casinos and the strip. If you go, there's an art district in Vegas that has great coffee and great food.
Oh my God. Do you want to talk about Vesta? Have you been there?
Oh, so dude, yes. I have a shirt from Vesta.
That place is amazing. Yes. I actually pulled it up to make sure that I didn't forget, but they have that Goosebumps blend. I think we brought 3 bags of it back. So good. And one of the guys that was working there and I hit it off because I was wearing a Giants hat. And we started talking baseball, and like, it was just like, he in essence guided me of like what I should order and kind of walked me through the whole thing. But Vesta is amazing. Yes. I mean, all the coffee you've ever had from there, and you can order it and it will come to Canada, which is awesome. Because a lot of times you run into kind of issues with like across the border ordering, but they figured it out and it's like flat $10 shipping or something.
Are you serious?
Yeah. It's
I gotta
crazy.
get some on the podcast. So I went to Vegas in 2020 for work when everything else in the world was shut down, but Vegas was still open.
Oh yeah.
But basically you just had to wear a mask everywhere. Anyway, I hated the strip so much and I was stuck there. Like my event got delayed that I was working. And so I went to Makers and Founders, Vesta, and then Mothership, I believe, is the other one. It's like
that one I don't know.
It's in the middle of like this weird kind of art area that used to be a hotel, but like it's a very, very cool spot. It's in the art district close to Old Vegas. But I basically was there just trying to find all of like the weird coffee shit, and so I went to Vesta like 3 or 4 times in the 5 days I was there. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I'll have to get them on because that was pre-podcast.
Oh, sick. Okay. So you could dive in because they've definitely got like a lot of coffee, but I'm a sucker for a place where the people that are working there can also talk to you about what's going on. But that place was fantastic. And like, there's just something about it. I don't know how to explain it properly. They just really knew what they were talking about and like really guided it through. That art district in Vegas is great. Like, I wish we had spent a little bit more time, although we did go to the punk rock museum that just opened there. And I literally met Fat Mike while I was there, which was painfully awkward, but I know, crazy, right?
He seems like the
big fucking weirdo.
Yeah. Just the biggest weirdo. I want to go to Sac Vegas.
Oh yeah.
Haunted Museum.
Yeah. There's that one. And there's also the, what is it? The Gangster Museum, the Mob Museum. Didn't get to that one, but definitely want to go because I've had a lot of conversations with people about how cool it is. But it's only so much time there. But
they should open a mobster museum in Montreal.
New York, and Vegas. Those are the 3.
The capitals.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, the New York one would be mostly Sopranos, which is hilarious because it's Jersey. But like, let's keep it real,
Do a whole exhibit on the gabagool. I'll take the gabagool. Well, that's awesome. I'm happy that somebody else knows Vesta because I've never talked to another person that knows that coffee shop. So,
so good.
So yeah, it's fucking amazing. I can't wait to play a show in Vegas, just to go.
100%.
And Tacos El Gordo. I know it's not for vegetarians or vegans at all, but it's because I tried it in San Diego the first time and I think that one closed, but the ones in Vegas are still open.
Yeah.
And it's my favorite US taco spot. Don't tell anybody that I said that, but it is.
Secret safe with us?
Yeah, secret safe with all the listeners. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that you guys enjoy the tour. It's going to be a lot of fun. Glad that you guys got the visas too. Are y'all releasing on Skeletal Lightning?
Yes. They're a cool little label. We had friends that were involved with them years ago. This band called Droughts, who are an incredibly underrated band. If you're intrigued at all by kind of interesting screamy stuff, they're a fantastic band. I wish they did more. I would love to tour with them at some point. We were lucky enough to play with them a few times in Chicago where they're from. But we had when we were looking for a home, we were kind of selective in the sense of like, I had different experiences with different labels over the years. And so we kind of knew partially what we were looking for. But also like, we didn't just want to be like, ugh, and see who came around. Like we really wanted to like, what's a roster that we think is super cool? What are they doing with it? You know, do they seemingly care about what's going on? And Skeletal had always been in the back of my head. I really like that Pool Kids band, and they're on Skeletal, and that band is fantastic. But also Ostraca is on there, and Jillian Carter is on there. And those are two other bands that for years touring, you know, you hear the names a lot. Big fan of Jillian Carter. Will openly admit that I'm harassing them to try and tour with us or play some shows together.
I can't believe they're still touring.
It's crazy.
I saw their around for like show in Georgia,
15 years or something like that.
Yeah, because they used to play like little DIYs in my hometown because they're from like Jacksonville, I think.
Yeah. Or maybe Orlando, somewhere in Florida.
Yeah. But they used to, they were from close to my hometown in Savannah. So they used to come play like little tiny shows.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they just got back from Europe, which is just bonkers to me, but
they're so good.
They're so good. But that was a big selling point. Like when you see bands that are kind of, they're not necessarily in your zone, but are like in the broad spectrum of, okay, my cat just came in here. So if you hear screaming, it's my cat. Nice. But when you see bands and they stick around, you know, like a lot of times, especially in heavier music, you'll see a release on this label and then a release on this label and then a release on this label. And like, that's cool. But like these bands are staying with them. I'm like, okay, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
And so I sent the record to a few people, not a lot of people. Somehow we started getting hit up by other places that I had not like reached out to. But as soon as we heard from Sean at Skeletal, he was like, let's get on a call. Let's chat a little bit. And by the end of that call, I remember like telling the boys, I was like, I think this is the right place. And we hadn't even got to the point of like talking about a contract or anything else. It was just, the conversation was so natural and it was so obvious that they gave a shit about every aspect of what was going on. They obviously care about the bands, but also like they care about the people that are ordering records and are, you know, spending their money and doing these things. And that was super refreshing and super comforting. And so when we finally got into kind of talking about the nitty gritty and everything came in, I was like, this is the fucking best. Like, how did we not know that this existed? And that feeling hasn't dissipated. Every time something comes up, they're like super excited about it. They're very transparent in how they communicate. Like, honestly, like everything that you would want out of a label without it having to be a headache. And, you know, they've got, you know, all the stuff all the positives about kind of bigger labels, but they're still just like a small crew. And like, I can just text Sean and just be like, hey, what's up? And like, it's that kind of relationship that's there. And that's really like not a common experience that I've at least had. So that was a very easy sell. And honestly, like, it's been fantastic. Like, it would be really hard to have a better experience than what we're doing with people that like I've never actually met in person. You know what I mean? Right. Like, it's all digital. But they're great. They've been really, really helpful with a lot of different things. They're very game for whatever idea we have, or, you know, if we throw something out there and they're like, actually, we've done this before. What about doing this? You know, like they're very in that zone, and it's awesome. You know, I could talk about them all day and just compliment them, and that would be a very long podcast. But it's fantastic, and they just really do give a shit. And a lot of times I get some cat photos out of it, which is really nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cat photos are always a win. Even in I'm in a coffee group on Discord, and we have like a little channel just for pet photos, and it's mostly just cats.
Nice.
So gotta love a good cat photo with the little tongue sticking out a little bit. Whereas, you know, it's very good. I can talk about cat photos all day, but that would also be a very
different podcast.
Yeah. That's not this. Well, like I said, super excited for you guys. Really excited to hear the EP, because I've been listening to the singles a bit, and they're like, what's the newer one? It's on, I can't remember the title of it.
Of Us Away.
Of Us Away.
Yeah.
But when it like just kind of slams in, like I expected it to be like the first single where it kind of like ramps up, but this one just kind of like, I like that. That
one's a funny song because for a very long time I was not a fan. We have like the full length, like a full length record that's done at the same time too. Like we've got a lot of songs, and when we were trying to figure out what the EP was going to be versus what the LP was, there's one song that we knew was going to be a B-side. It wasn't going to be on anything. But that one, I was like, really like, I don't want to do it. When we started practicing it properly and started putting it together, I was a little bit more on board, and playing it live is what sealed the deal for me on it, because that's like, we're playing in essence 5 songs live, the 4 off the EP, and then one that we've written specifically for like live stuff that's a little more dynamic and kind of all over the place. But playing that song on the shows that we've played so far, at least anyway, you can see that's where everybody kind of goes, and it's like, that's a nice thing to have happen, because the rest of it, it's like you're digesting the band, you're kind of getting the waves of what we do. We've got the heavy stuff, we've got the kind of like not so heavy things, we've got the dynamic shifts, the big riffs, whatever. And then this one is like the hammer that keeps hitting you in the face. And I'm glad I was wrong about it. Like I'm glad that I had that kind of turn in opinion and that sort of thing. And I really have become a fan. But I also have to say, like, Dylan Gould that did our video fucking crushed it. And that also was a really nice thing to like watch this video and go like, okay, yeah, no, this is good. We're good. So, but yeah, I mean, maybe you're too close to things. Sometimes you're not going to see the impact of it, but yeah, I'm very happy to be wrong about that song.
Well, all that to say, very excited to see you guys in November. Excited for all the things y'all have coming up. Good luck with the tour, because I think the biggest way for Canadian bands to actually get exposure is to tour the States, unfortunately. But also fortunately, because then you get good food and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, good food is good is a relative term, depending on what you're talking about.
You get more options.
More options. Yeah. More. I mean, there's just more of everything, right? So
yeah,
as a byproduct of that.
It's like if you took the limiter off and you just are exposed to whatever. I
mean, Waffle House is a thing. So,
Oh, dude, I could talk about Waffle House all day. That's like very close to home. Anyway, I have one last question for you before we wrap this up. What's your favorite city for beans and breakdowns?
I love New York. It's hard to say. They've got good coffee. They've got good shows. That's kind of a generic answer, if I'm being honest with you, though. So trying to like spread the wings a little bit. I've always loved playing in Boston, and there is a diner there called Alston Diner that, in my opinion, has the best diner coffee.
Okay.
That's a little bit of a weird one, but like, all the venues in Boston that are like, you're going to see the shows that we play at generally are in Alston or Cambridge. And this place is right in the middle between those two. So that would definitely be up there. But, New York is really hard to argue with. Philly is a great spot. They've got that grindcore house or grindhouse.
Grindcore coffee house or grindcore house coffee, I think is
fucking fantastic coffee. Everybody that works there is like a sweetheart, which is really nice. And Philadelphia for a very long time was like a great spot for shows for Sparrows. The crew that ended up being in Soul Glow and some of these other big Philly bands were the bands that we started playing with when we started touring there. So that's like a soft spot in my heart, so to speak. But I mean, like we were saying before we started recording, nowadays there's good coffee everywhere. You just have to find it, and there's a lot of places that you don't want to play. So that kind of cancels things out a little bit.
The coffee, just avoid the coffee deserts. You'll be fine.
I mean, I'm sure that West Texas is just not a joy for anything, but that's just a guess.
I mean, that's an accurate statement. I don't want to clown anybody because I have friends from there, but I've spent some time in West Texas, and it is a wasteland for most things.
That's what I would guess. Yeah.
Well, Dan, thanks so much for hanging out. It's been a lot of fun. Wishing you and Low Heaven all the best, and can't wait to catch you in Montreal soon.
Oh, I can't wait, man. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm glad we both got excited about Vesta. That's a nice one. Yeah.
That's a bonding moment.
Oh, for sure. I'm going to order some right now.
Take it easy.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beans and Breakdowns. I want to say a huge thanks to Dan for coming on the podcast. Be sure to check out the newest EP from Low Heaven, dropping tomorrow, August 25th. You can listen to the 3 singles that are up on streaming right now, but check out the full EP dropping tomorrow. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. You can find out more information about the podcast by following us on Instagram at Beans and Breakdowns or on the web at beansandbreakdowns.com. Until next week, be sure to stay caffeinated and wake the fuck up.